Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. Today, I want to address two different mindsets that are kind of combative with each other. One being the people who think you should basically treat any animal exactly like it is in the wild. If you have a pet snake, its habitat and food and everything should be exactly like it is in the wild. The other point of view that's kind of the opposite being you should have a super sterile, everything kind of plastic or glass, minimalist, some would call it. The keepers who really work with their animals, doing things that would never happen in nature, but they're socializing them basically. These are two very different viewpoints, and I want to address them today. So to do that, I'm going to use some extreme examples and then some more in the middle. My first example is right here. This is Zoey. She's our old girl. We cannot treat this animal as if she were in the wild. We cannot go to that extreme on this spectrum, basically, because she is not a wild animal and has not been for, like, who knows, 3,000 generations, right? Many, many, many instincts from her wolf ancestry are gone. She probably couldn't survive in the wild, at least not here in Alaska. She's just not equipped for it. That's not to say that some dogs couldn't, but as a species, they would just not thrive, right? I know there's feral dogs and all that, but this individual dog right here, our pet animal who's been raised in captivity, we can't just stick her out in the woods and expect her to do great. It won't work very well. She'll get injured, she'll starve, she'll freeze, she'll get lost. She's just not equipped for it, right? That's not to say she's not a healthy, intelligent animal. She is. For an old, she's a rescue, but 12, 13-year-old dog. She's very healthy, very fit. She's a great animal, but it's very clear to most people we couldn't just treat her like she's a wild animal, right? She wouldn't do well. Now, we could probably feed her a more natural food, right? And we have made a little bit of gains in that department. When we have it, we give her, raw quail eggs that we've produced ourselves. We've given her raw salmon, organ meat from rabbits that we've harvested, things like that. And she does great with it. Most dogs do. Many people, there's a movement to move all their dogs and even cats over to a completely raw, whole prey kind of diet. I think that's great. But she also eats just dog food, Anyways, so that is one extreme, right? An argument, if you will, against the whole you should treat an animal exactly like its environment in the wild, right? Plus, we don't want our dogs to be wolves. We want them to trust humans. We want them to be friendly around humans. We want them to play with us. We want them to sit next to us and snuggle us and give us some socialization when we're supposed to be socially distant from everybody. That's what we want in our dogs. We want companionship. And while wolves are very social creatures, they're not really evolved to socialize with humans, right? They're very, very, very skittish. They're dangerous. They would be fearful of a human or defensive or something. We don't want that in our dogs. We've moved completely away from that, right? Dogs are easily the most socialized species of animal on Earth. To humans, I should say, right? So let me give you another example. I'll be right back. This is Jarlet. He is our male red-footed tortoise, okay? And Zoe's very interested in him. It's okay, Zoe. He was asleep, so let's leave him alone, okay? This animal is a perfect example of why you do still have to understand what the environment of your given animal species is in the wild. You cannot just take any animal and expect them to thrive with humans, with human food, with human conditions, because clearly this animal, wherever he was before we rescued it, I'm not sure where, he didn't thrive. He's missing an eye. His shell is badly pyramided. That's the deformed shape to his shell. When we first got him, he had a really bad wheeze. He's almost completely over. He's got a little whistle now, but pretty much gone. Regardless, he did not get the right UV radiation. He did not get the right diet. He probably was not kept humid enough. He may not have been kept warm enough. The person who had him, or the people, however many people he's passed through, because tortoises live a while, at some stage of his development at least, he was not kept like they would be in the wild, with full sun and humidity and a wide range of vegetation as their diet. So this would be an argument that you do need to keep them somewhat similar to how they are in the wild, because there are actual physiological requirements for animals that differ from species to species. If you don't know what the requirements of your animal are, then you're gonna mess them up. Now, he's happy. I'm not trying to throw tons of blame on these people, whoever it was, but I'm glad that we rescued him because he's a good boy. He's very friendly. He loves his pets. I love watching him charge the salad bowl whenever we fill it up. He's a great animal. He deserves a happy home. And I'm not saying that he should be put back in the wild, but he should be kept in a way that mimics what nature would give him in the wild, right? So this is kind of an argument for the other side. So I'm gonna go put him back because he clearly was sleeping. But he's such a good boy. And we need to show the tortoises more off. Anyway, right. The other two we got are in much better condition. Very happy to say. I could pull them out, but that's not the point of this vlog. I just wanted to pull him out and show you kind of what is wrong with him so you can get a visual for, yes, you do actually need to understand what nature would be offering these animals. Okay, so I'm going to go put him back. Now, we'll get into the nitty gritty. This is Galadriel, by the way. She's a female ball python. She's a super Mojave or blue-eyed Lucy. Gorgeous, awesome, fantastic snake. Okay? Now, ball pythons in the wild are not a super aggressive species. Many people have picked them up right out of the wild and not got bit, right? But they're going to be more skittish than a captive-bred, multi-generation in captivity animal like this beautiful girl here. Right? So some level of socialization has happened genetically with multiple generations in captivity, and some has happened just as more of her adapting her own behaviors as she's learned that humans are safe and all that, right? She is not kept in a gigantic, bioactive, full of tunnels and termite mounds kind of environment like she would be in the wild, right? So with our ball pythons, we are closer to the end of the spectrum of a sterilized, very regimented routine. There's no danger in her life. There's no real adrenaline in her life other than maybe feeding day. So that's not natural, right? It's not how she would be kept in the wild. Now her physiological needs are being met. The proper humidity, the proper photo period, the proper temperatures, the what I feel is a correct amount of food, but she's not eating, jerboas and rodents native to sub-Saharan Africa. She's eating rats, right? So she's in between. She's somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, right? Why did I want to address this? I have heard reptile keepers, reptile breeders make arguments based on their natural conditions for a wild animal to justify how they are keeping their animals in captivity. But what's interesting is that depending on what they're trying to justify, they appeal to both ends of the spectrum, which is not it's not very logically consistent. What I mean is, you have a breeder who feeds live, okay? Somebody doesn't like it. They're like, that's dangerous. You're endangering your animal. And the breeder's like, that's how it is in nature. They eat live and they do just fine. So that's how I feed them here. And my animals have always been fine, right? They're appealing to This is how it is in nature. Therefore, this is how it should be in captivity, right? It's natural for them. It's a very powerful emotional argument, okay? But then that same breeder cuts his eggs at day 52, right? Somebody else does not like that. They're like, that's just unnatural. There's no giant ape in nature going through and slitting all the eggs so the babies can get out. And that breeder says, well, this isn't nature, is it? This is captivity, so I can do it this way. And this is why I like to make sure that they can cut out in case they don't have their egg tooth properly or whatever, right? But they just appealed to the opposite. They're like, this isn't nature. This isn't out in the wild, so I don't have to do it that way. Well, that's fine, but you can't have it both ways, right? Either we should ethically try and keep everything natural, or that doesn't matter. One or the other. It's inconsistent logically to say, for this thing that I do, I'm going to justify it because it's natural, and that makes it better. But for this other thing I do, I'm going to disregard what is natural because we're not in nature, we're in captivity, so it doesn't matter. You just can't. Do you see what I'm saying? This bothers me. So I decided to make a whole vlog about it, even though it doesn't really matter, but I just wanted to talk about this. So, some of you might be thinking, well, you guys do both of those things at the reptile barn. You feed live, but you also feed some frozen thawed. You cut some eggs sometimes. Why are you doing it both ways? We do several things, some of which are a little bit more natural and some of them which are not. The difference is, I'm not claiming that any of these practices is better because it is natural or would occur in the wild. Here, I don't want to call any names out, and I will not do that because people are just giving their opinions on YouTube, right? These are not professors debating professionally. But sometimes I will see people who will find an animal in the wild, a retic or whatever, and be like, look at the body condition of this animal. Our retics in captivity must be way obese because none of them are this skinny in captivity, right? So they must not be getting enough exercise and they must be eating way too much because look at this wild retic. Well, that retic is in the wild. It would love to not have to run away from predators. It would love to not have a huge parasite load in its digestive tract. It would love to get more food than it's getting. It just can't because it's in nature and nature's a jerk. Right? Nature is trying to kill it and it's managing to stay alive. But surviving and thriving are different and sometimes they look different. Okay? So, you've all seen, well, I don't know if you've all seen it, but I have seen pictures of a wild deer or a wild moose or caribou or elk that looks awful. It's barely hanging on. It's the end of winter. It has barely gotten enough food through the winter to survive. It's just skin and bones. And if you went and found that animal and you're like, this is what they should look like because this is in nature, you're insane. That just doesn't make any sense, right? Of course the animal would be healthier if it had more food. It's going to look a lot bigger. Are you going to say that in the middle of summer when that animal's nice and robust looking, now it's obese? No, that's how it should be. But sometimes they just can't because they're in nature. In captivity, yes, please don't get me wrong. There are obese snakes in captivity. But that doesn't mean that we know they should look like this because I saw one in the wild that looked like this. I watched a video, I believe from Dave Kaufman a little while ago, about water monitors in the wild. And he was showing some wild water monitors just out in the woods, in the rivers and stuff. And they had one look to them. Then he showed some that were hanging out in the city, okay? Far fewer predators, tons of food available, just human trash and detritus, unfortunately. Those water monitors in the city, they were big, they were plump, they were fat and happy, right? who's to say which one is right? Sometimes we get this mindset where if there is any human influence whatsoever on an animal or a tree or a whole ecosystem, it's worse because of it. Just interaction with humans makes nature bad, makes it worse. Well, I disagree. Very frequently that is the case, but there's no natural law that says humans are bad for nature. Human choices can be bad for nature, but I don't, again, that's not what this vlog is about. I'm trying to focus in here, but I keep getting off on these tangents. My point is just, yes, here at the Reptile Barn, we are all over the spectrum on these different practices. In some ways, I would like to be more towards the natural side of things because I feel like an animal with more space, with more stimulus in its environment is going to be happier. I think that. I'm not certain of it, but I believe that. So I would like to offer that to my animals. And in the future, we will. But that doesn't mean that an animal in a very clean, sterile tank is unhealthy, right? Now, if you have your animals and you get them out a lot and they're getting plenty of exercise and they're getting to see and smell and hear things, so they're getting mentally stimulated, they're getting physically stimulated, they're moving, they're climbing, they're exploring, and you keep them to a decent but not over the top feeding regime, that is a healthy animal. And I would dare say that is a healthier animal than in the wild. This snake has never had a parasite. It never will probably ever have a parasite. That right there makes it healthier than its natural in nature counterpart, right? Anyways, so all I'm getting at is we are not appealing to nature to make our decisions. We're informing our decisions by some of the things we know about in nature. We know, for example, in nature, ball pythons are not eating insects, right? I can't imagine they're eating it. I've never heard of someone claim that they eat insects, so we feed them rodents. That is what every study that's been done says they primarily eat in nature is rodents. So that's what we're given ours, right? So some of our decisions are informed by what happens in nature. But I'm not saying that I'm not going to cut any eggs because nobody cuts their eggs in nature. If I feel there's a need to cut some eggs, I'm going to do it, regardless of what is or is not natural. At the same time, if I discover, because currently none of our ball pythons have UV light, right? All our lizards do, but our ball pythons do not. If I read a study that is scientifically done, not one of these emotional appeals that you get from some people, but it's very scientifically done with proof of what is happening on a cellular level or whatever it takes to say these animals need UV. If I saw that, I would change my ways. Because nature, the animal's body in this case, is telling us I have this need that's not being met. And so I would try and meet it, right? But I don't know. I think that people get so upset about husbandry issues that they see with other people. The size of the tub, the size and frequency of the meals, live versus frozen thawed, there's just rage about these things, and people instantly jump to either, well, but this is how it is in nature, so you should be doing it this way, you're unnatural, or they immediately jump to, this animal's not in nature, so we don't need to keep it like it was out in the wild. There's, you know what I mean? People just jump to one of these things as if that backs them up. I don't think those should be used. What your animal needs and wants should be most important, right? If you can learn about what your animal needs by observing nature, then do that. But just because a giant hawk comes and kills a ball python in nature, should we be subjecting our ball pythons to giant hawks all the time? No, absolutely not. Again, I'll say it again, nature is vicious. We don't want all aspects of a wild animal's life to carry over to captivity. We're trying to change them, trying to change their color. We're trying to change their temperament. We're trying to change a lot of things about them. How many wild snakes let you do this? You know what I mean? Like, with no fear that she's going to bite me at all. I can just mess with her head. I can pick her all up and turn her around, and she is fearless. A wild snake would be musking or peeing or trying to escape, thrashing or biting or hissing or something. I don't want any of those behaviors in my snakes. I want them like this, right? So I have rambled long enough at you. I hope you at the very least enjoyed seeing a couple of cool animals. But let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of you who watch are reptile keepers. You have your own animals. I would love to hear what you believe and why you believe it about how you keep them. Those of you who are doing bioactive is something I'm getting more and more interested in. What are the pros and cons? I don't want to go onto a website that sells bioactive substrates and all these things who's telling me how great bioactive is, right? There's a little bit of a bias there. Some of you guys who have tried it, who have tried both ways, let me know what you think. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are all staying safe. And until next time, we are the Reptile Barn. Yeah.